Hello and welcome to a very special pre-recorded North American continent episode of our regular live chat vidcast. I am joined by Ash Barker of Guerrilla Miniatures Games.
I'm here from the colonies.
That's it.
represent the Commonwealth in this Commonwealth Games of Drowned Earth.
Unfortunately, we were also expecting Shawn Galligan, who is the lead wayfarer, our ambassador program in North America, but he's having some connection difficulties. So hopefully he's going to turn up in about 15 or 20 minutes.
The jungle's thick there in that part of the wasteland.
Yeah. it's all difficult stuff, right?
I have a question actually, as we talk about this, because I always like to identify miniature games with my home soil, my homeland. Yeah. How do you envision that the Canadian part of North America survived in the Drowned Earth? Because I feel like the part that is sort of depicted in the rule book is very it's very like, I don't know if you where even that part is set in my mind. It feels like it's set in the United States. Is that part set in the United States? Or
well, it's ambiguous. I haven't. I know the answer, but I'm not letting on.
It feels like Los Angeles to me.
As to whether so the question is it our world at all? Not necessarily.
That makes sense.
So it's certainly a world that looks quite a lot like ours, and certainly looks like you might envisage, or at least the world of the builders looks a lot like you might envisage our future in a few hundred years' time. I'm keeping quiet on that one. But let's put it this way: if there's a US analog and a Europe analog, then there'll definitely be a Canada analog. And
I'm just wondering if there's anywhere cold left on Earth. If it's all just the ice caps have melted and it's all steaming jungles and equatorial vegetation.
You can enjoy a very nice subtropical gentle climate at the poles.
Okay, fair enough. So there is no extreme weather conditions. It's all very warm and wet.
That's right.
And gotcha.
It's polar ice caps melted and everything's looking that's it, sunny tropical, subtropical. So I don't know if you've ever read it, but my original starting point for the setting was the Drowned World by J.G. Ballard.
I have read it, and it takes place in the UK. It's actually it's a great, one of the great, I would say there's probably about a half dozen really great end of the world novels from like the 60s and 70s during that perestroika paranoia. And I would say that Roadside Picnic, what's On the Beach, they all have their own different tropes. I really like Drowned World though, because it's sciencey enough, because it follows scientists, right, as they start to kind of explore.
It's proper hard sci-fi, I think.
It's scienccy enough that I think that it for its time especially, it was a real warning about environmental catastrophe and what could go wrong, and really kind of avant-garde. Like I look at it now kind of through the lens of, growing up in the environmental panic, the whole Captain Planet, the Planeteers cartoons on Saturday morning TV and stuff, and it's a bit, but we all know this could happen. But at the time, no one was really thinking about what would happen if the ice caps melted and we were all underwater.
But it has some really nice themes about you having this sort of genetic memory and all of the organisms on the planet, people and otherwise, are kind of regressing to this Jurassic state, which is all fascinating stuff. And that has nothing to do with the Drowned Earth. It was just environmentally a starting point.
There's a Warren Ellis comic too called Freak Angels that was about a post-apocalypse drowned UK. With a bunch of psychic kids. It was kind of like a Warren Ellis version of the Chrysalids. And the entirety of the world had kind of like been enveloped in water, and what would happen sociologically if that happened, if that took place, basically, and everything became Venice. And you had to raft around, and how would you grow food and all that stuff.
So there's also a great graphic novel called Drowned Town, which they did one part of, and then I can't remember who did it, but somebody reasonably well known in the comic book world, and which is not necessarily my world. But while I was writing this, somebody mentioned it to me, and I read it and really bemoaned the fact that there wasn't a second half. But people, there are thieves riding around London on jet skis and stuff like that. There's lots of good stuff.
That happens a lot, especially with Warren Ellis. He'll have an idea and he'll write like 6 trades worth of comics, and then it'll just stop. He'll go somewhere else. There was he did one called Global Frequency that was really good, but it was all basically shortened novellas. And then once he was just bored with the idea, he just stopped writing it. It was just over.
I hate these unfinished things. I hate cancelled TV shows and what have you.
I actually don't mind canceled things that much. Even miniature games, actually, I don't mind when something has an end, because you feel like you then have like this ultimate liberty and license to play in that playground, because there's no more coming. So you kind of have to go make up your own stuff. So I think a lot of great like indie development in games, and a lot of great imagination happens when you don't give away all the answers. I have a bit of a sticking point right now with Games Workshop and their whole Horus Heresy series, because I feel like it's filling in too much of the mystery. And when you're talking about a creative hobby, a hobby where part of the enjoyment for a lot of people, not every person, because people are different, but for I think rounded hobbyists, is injecting their own vision of something into the universe, right? So you create your own faction, your own thing, and you have your own sort of creation.
Some room between the gaps for people's own
exactly. Or even just give you enough information that you inspire creativity, you know what I mean? A hint of something. And if you give away too many answers, then you're kind of painting in, and people start trying to make things historically accurate as opposed to using their imaginations and projecting into a sandbox, right?
Yeah.
So
people getting rivet counting about what Space Marine chapters had what symbols on the shoulder pads, and
setting them where and when, and then you're slowly grinding into the world of historical miniatures where there's just not enough vampires and zombies for me, and I get bored and tired and get worn out really quickly. Unless you get too far. You get far enough back in historical miniatures, and then we don't know enough about what happened. Like if you get to medievals and dark ages and stuff like that, we know a lot of what happened, but there's enough that you can fill in your imagination and stuff.
No, I always get amused with ancients, where people so I did a degree in ancient history and archaeology, and you hear people waxing lyrical about those Spartans are wrong because they've got the wrong symbols on their shields, and they should be wearing a different shade of red. And it's like, oh, come on, we've got exactly zero evidence for any of that stuff.
You say that because all you've read is an Osprey illustrated history of the Spartan Empire, and you think that those illustrations,
or you've watched 300.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is obviously going to be a slightly different format to our usual thing, but we are going to go through a little bit of news at least. Now, this is going out on the first Tuesday of April, which means that Adepticon has been and come, but it hasn't in our world. So you're going to be heading along and helping, sort of giving Shawn a bit of cheerleading and moral support, because he's
I'll be showing him on Friday. He's held a spot for me as the ringer, I guess. In the event, so I'm going to pack up my firm and my wayfarers, and make a fool of myself throwing dice, falling off buildings, and pretending shouting parkour a lot as my monkeys fall, and I make jumps with the monkeys and climbs with the lizards, as I shouldn't do.
Well, I think Shawn's actually got a special award dedicated to one particular. So his Hosk for some reason has got the mockers on it, and it just can't climb or jump, and ends up falling on his face during every single game. So he's the first person to fail a climb test, I think, is gonna get the monkey award.
I will probably be responsible for killing more of my models than anyone else. That's
so it's then you win the moral victory, right? So then the next bit of news is that I am, and this will time of time of publication, it will be in 2 days. The weekend, second weekend of April, will be Salute, where we are going as always, although this time we're sharing with Element Games. We're going to be giving demos on Element Games stand, because one of the problems we've had in past years, well, the first time we did Salute was during our Kickstarter, so we obviously couldn't sell anything. And last year we just had a demo stand, so we weren't selling anything either. Element had the stock, but they were like halfway across the hall, and it was really awkward for anybody who wanted to buy the game. You know, I know a lot of people were just a bit frustrated that they had to walk back another 5 minutes in the wrong direction to buy it. So this time we're actually going to be giving demos where it's available to sell, which should be good. So that's stand TB05. It's in the second row on the left-hand side as you come in. So one of the first stands. So that's all very exciting. Have you ever been to Salute?
Yeah, years and years ago. It wasn't quite what it's become now, but it was still a zoo. It was the one when I went. It was probably the most impressed I've ever been with gaming clubs. Salute's legendary for the tables that get put on by gaming clubs. And it was just a magic experience for me, because most conventions now in North America have, I would say, moved away from being a place where people of common interests get together to celebrate their interests, and become mostly about vendors. So vendors and tournaments. So you either have giant rooms full of that like locker room smell of a whole bunch of people trying to participate in a tournament and slowly getting dehydrated and headachy and more cranky. And then you have rows and rows and rows of vendors that are, you know, all talking about whatever the next thing is. But there isn't really any spectacle. And for me, Salute, when I went, I was blown away with the spectacle of the gaming clubs. And it's just these like just because tables, these things that people make because they're passionate about it. And it might not be
one of the ones that I absolutely loved a couple of years ago was and it, you know, it's on point for me thematically, but somebody just did a Jurassic Park table, homebrew rules, plastic dinosaurs, plastic jeeps, and you know, and they did that wonderful thing that you see a lot at Salute, where they wear a silly costume and just gather everybody in. Everyone who walks past, they hand dice to, so come and join in. And you know, you have these really amazing participation games with where, you know, as you say, it's just clubs. There's nothing to win, nothing to lose. It's just join in and have crazy fun and think of a insane idea for next year.
Yeah, for those of you outside the UK that are listening to this, I would say that makes, if you're thinking of Salute as just being a UK Adepticon or a UK Gen Con or something like that, it's very much not that. It's really, there's a lot of a feeling of celebration of the hobbies and interests and stuff. And it's a real testimony, I think, to the club culture in the UK. And how powerful that is for you guys as just like a collective group of hobbyists.
Mind you, I guess it's the grass is greener because we're jealous of your shop-based scene, because you know
for sure. Well, you're also jealous of just the space we have.
Right? It's space and real estate.
We have gaming clubs. I think that it's funny too, because it's something that I've having traveled all over and seen just gaming stores in different parts of the world. Our commodity that we take for granted here in North America is space. We just have more space and less people in that space than we have, more people, but less per square mile than you guys do. So I think your club culture is part of, you are used to sharing spaces together and collecting as a community to share spaces, and like the church basement full of gaming tape, like all that stuff is very normal for you guys. Whereas in North America, we're used to buying a commodity and then having that be the reason that we go back to that shop is the reason is to play. So gaming stores not having gaming tables is a huge deal in North America, whereas shops don't typically need to have gaming tables because there's a local club in a lot of places in the UK, and they might still, you know, they do more and more, I think, adopt that North American style. But
well, particularly with Magic the Gathering and then like the sort of Fantasy Flights games. Exactly. But I think it's good. It's nice that those companies understand that you need to create an organized play scene, and you need to really give people reasons and excuses to play.
What's interesting though is you have an easier idea or an easier, I think, time with ambassadoring games and stuff in your communities because of that club culture. Whereas there was a lot of needing to give people free stuff.
I see.
America to try and ambassadors.
And I don't know if it's correct, but I've always had the impression that the competitive scene is more important to you guys than it is over here.
It's just louder.
Right.
It's not important. It's not more important. So here's the difference: is in North America there are more people playing in very small groups in basements.
Yep.
Instead of in large community groups in clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So think about all your gaming clubs that you have in the UK, split them all into pairs of 2, 3, 4 people, and put them in basements where no one sees them.
Yeah, I see.
Right. So I think that there's I think there's a lot of in North America there's a habit of chest pumping. That's a very North American. I mean, I don't want to say that's a that stereotype is true, but there's a certain brashness, I think, to North Americans that comes out in how competitive play is presented as being very important.
Yeah.
But I think that if you look at just the rise of casual play and kitchen table games in mainstream gaming right now, if you look at things like Shadespire, which is supposed to be a competitive game but is played a lot casually, and then just like board games like Warhammer Quest and stuff like that, and just how well they've sold, and even just board game culture right now in North America, how well that stuff's selling. Like that the competitive play is the part that gets the most press, right? Because there's winners and losers, and in North America we like to talk about who the winners and losers are, but I don't think that's where the dollars are coming from. I think that's still coming from the basements.
That's interesting. That's it. And so perhaps the other knock-on effect from that is that you then not having large groups of a regular large gaming pool. It's then more important to find reasons to gather together to have a tournament style event, as opposed to a club running, a league or, a sort of Necromunda or Blood Bowl league. Or I
think that's why conventions become important for us, is because you're playing in smaller groups to see a whole bunch of people together and have an excuse to get together, like tournaments and stuff. That being celebrated, I think in North America that becomes culturally more important. Whereas your gaming clubs will show up on a regular basis and see 10, 20, 30 people playing all together, in an afternoon. It's not so. You go out and you celebrate and have something like Salute, where the gaming clubs all get together and they see each other and they all try and make the coolest table. Whereas here it's all individuals who don't know anybody. So a good icebreaker. Tournaments are a great icebreaker. I've actually said that a lot. Is some of the worst players only play in tournaments because not the worst players. Some of the most unfriendly people only play in tournaments because they have to pay people to play games with them.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
But for a lot of people, it's just to connect with people that have the hobby that they have. And again, the market penetration of wargaming in North America is not nearly what it is brand recognition wise in the UK. The word Warhammer is still something that is not something people know in North America versus and it's becoming more regular, but not nearly what it is in the UK, where if you don't have people making jokes about canceling. What was that? Was Spaced, where he makes a joke about canceling his White Dwarf subscription? Like on the BBC show, and Simon Pegg's like, "Oh, I'm so broke, I had to cancel my White Dwarf subscription." It's like that's a joke you just wouldn't get.
Did you get the IT crowd over there?
We did, yeah.
So there's one in that where Jen, the manager of the two geeks, says she's becoming one of them, and she doesn't want to hear any more of this geek talk because that's where it starts, but it ends with her sitting in a basement painting little Lord of the Rings figurines.
Exactly. Yeah, it's become something, I think, in your cultural zeitgeist. It's not there yet outside of the UK. It's just been there longer. It's part of your culture, and I think again because of that sense of community that is very strong in the UK, it gets around more too culturally inside your I think just your society.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But I will definitely, strongly recommend Salute as a visit to anybody who is interested in wargaming in general. And it's very interesting to hear your perspective on the difference between that show as opposed to the more American style conventions. And we have some of those, but they're mostly board gaming based with a little bit of wargaming rather than the other way around. And I think that from my perspective, the South London Warlords, which is the club that runs Salute and founded it, they've done something very important. They've kept the ratio of what they call demonstration tables, so those participation games, as 50-50 with the vendors. So it's one aisle vendors, one aisle participation games all the way down the hall. And I think that's what's preserved that mood,
That's great. Yeah, no, it feels, I think too, it's just it's a great show to to just expose people to that sense of community. It feels more like a carnival than it does like a sales floor, right? Because you can walk into almost, I mean, sure, in London every week there's probably a trade show for something, be it, you know, buying like computers or where you can walk in, there's just a million vendors with their rollaway stands, and they're all trying to sell you something. But it feels very different walking into something where there's people actively having a good time and shouting at each other. And you know, like you said, there's a Jurassic Park too. There's people with Jeeps chasing dinosaurs or whatever.
And I love that idea that you've actually gone on a sort of you've created a homebrew rule set just for one day, you know, just you've set up the table, you've invented the rules and have everybody come along.
If you're looking for it on the internet, actually, I would highly recommend it. It's a bit old school. It's not in vogue anymore, but there's a forum, an internet forum that people still go on. I don't know. Social media has kind of taken that over, called the Let Adventure Forum. It's it originates from I think it's German because it's got .de in its old web address. But that is a collection of just club people that do stuff just because. And there's been tons of rule sets actually that have germinated out of there.
Yeah.
I think we got a Shawn.
Ah, hello.
Hooray.
Can you hear me?
Can we hear you?
I can hear you.
Almost. We're nearly there.
Can you hear me?
It's been a slow but solid victory. I think.
No?
I can hear you. I can hear you fine.
You can. I can't for some reason. Okay. How are we doing?
You muted yourself. Unmute whatever you have. You've muted. You might need to change your mic inputs. I don't know. Let's see. No, now we're outside.
We're outside.
We're getting a tour of Shawn's place. Looking at the balcony.
So we'll let Shawn get on, and hopefully he'll get his technical issues sorted out in the meantime. But before he turns up, and while we're on the subject of Jurassic Park tables, I don't have a lot of news because I got drunk on red wine during the last chat and just let way too much out of the bag as far as what's coming is concerned. So I sort of spent all my news in one go. But I do have and it's in various different parts, but a 3D print, the master print of our Keratosaur, which is coming out soon, and he's quite a big guy. So will that hold just about? There's not. So he goes on a 50mm base, and so I guess you don't know how big my hands are, but I think he's about 120mm long, something like that. So he's not a small model, but I'm having lots of fun at the moment, play testing, deciding whether it's completely broken to use 2 in a list.
You have to probably be Wishbone. Wishbone can bring actions. You get the Beast Handler upgrade and take Wishbone's Dino Riders.
Yeah, I like it.
He probably doesn't listen very well.
Beautiful thing.
As long as he's got 3 actions, he's okay.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I like throwing the dinos into the mix just for the sake of variety, but you know, there are all sorts of fun tactical things that you can do with them, and the Keratosaur in particular, a little bit of a sort of sneak preview of his rules. He has a ranged weapon, which is his roar, which uses the teardrop template and doesn't do any damage, but it knocks anyone over that's under that template when it goes down. So yeah. It's a bit of fun. It's lots of fun to use.
Should track with a glass of water.
Am I back?
yeah, exactly.
Hello.
16.
I can hear him. I can hear Shawn.
Hello.
Good stuff. I can't, but do you know what? I'm sure
there's a good chance that even though you can't hear him, he could be recording to this.
Yeah, that's what I hear him.
It's entirely possible that
that's what I assumed. Yeah, it's probably just something going on my end because I couldn't hear you to begin with either until you reconnected. So
I can hear you, Shawn. So if you want to just
Oh, no, he's gone and he's coming back. So the next segment, I thought we'd just have a chat about what we've been playing recently. Now, due to the nature of your work, this will be a long list for you. So, and there might be things that you don't necessarily want to talk about in terms of games that videos that are coming out in the near future.
No.
So
I'm not.
Just throw out a few. What have you been enjoying recently? It can be miniatures games. It can be board games, card games, video games, anything you like.
I'll back to my most recent. So my most recent game I've been playing is I just finished trying out Moonstone.
Okay, yeah.
Another it's a very scale wise, like kitchen table game wise.
Yeah,
it's very much in the same scale as Drowned Earth.
Yeah,
playing about 6 miniatures typically, sometimes more, sometimes less. It's points free, so there's no need to like balance points or worry about writing lists. You just draft in characters. And it's the way I described it in the first video we did is it's basically if you could imagine Brian Froud and Terry Gilliam writing a miniature game one weekend while drunk, that's what stuff feels like. So it's very much Brian Froud's. I think you probably have these in the UK because I think he's a British artist.
Yeah,
he did Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal, and he was at Heads and art design. He did all the concepts for those.
Yeah,
it's goblins and fairies and stuff, that kind of look. And the humans are all very Terry Gilliam's Adventures of Baron von Munchausen, kind of like everything's exaggerated, so the giant poopy sleeves and mustaches and all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love the aesthetic when when I first saw it, the immediate thing I thought of was this is like Labyrinth, the miniatures game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it was before the
sounds really cool and beautiful.
Alessio Calvatore released the board game, Labyrinth board game. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
James?
good stuff. I still can't, but let's not worry about it. We'll presume that we're recording.
It should all be being recorded. So just you talk away, and if I need to communicate anything between the two of you, I'll be the go-between.
Yeah. Okay, so Moonstone. I haven't played it, but I've spoken a little bit to one of the designers because we're just we come from more or less the same place and very similar game.
It's really great. It has a really innovative combat mechanic. It uses a card-based combat mechanic.
Yep.
Which I really enjoyed, and then it was just a breath of fresh air. I hadn't played It's funny. I talked about this a little bit, 2 to 3 days ago. I can't remember who I was speaking about it with, but since what I'm going to call the great wake up by Games Workshop, there haven't been a lot of new miniature games released.
Yeah.
Or companies, even just small little boutique companies like yours starting up. And it seems like the kind of high seas of the internet that used to be where small independent developers could get noticed and almost have the same level of bandwidth as anyone else because there wasn't like a 24-hour news cycle of things coming out, have been drowned out by this 52 releases a year, 24-hour news cycle, Games Workshop news feed. Which is sort of how they've approached their entrance into the world of online community building. And it was really cool to see a new game because I hadn't seen a game in quite some time. And in fact, since that kind of wake up happened, there'd been a small series of collapses of small companies such as Hawk War Games, Spartan Games. They all there was like a month where like 4 or 5 companies all just dissolved and were bought by various distributors. So it was really neat to see one, and I really enjoyed playing it too. So that's the most recent one I've been playing. I've been playing a bunch of Adeptus Titanicus, robot fighting, which has been fun. I played that in the 80s, one of my first games I ever played, and the new edition you can tell it was made with a lot of heart. I'm hoping there's a bit more coming out for it in the near future because I think there's lots of opportunity for growth there. But if the release plan for this is similar to other workshop products, it's because they're holding back releases to keep it steady for the next couple of years because they're trying to do something.
I think they need to start doing that really because they just sort of the releases have come so thick and fast that I think there must be a lot of cannibalization of their own sales going on where they release Necromunda, everyone's like, yay, Necromunda, I remember that from back in the day, and then Kill Team's like 2 weeks later and everyone's like, Necromunda, why would we play that? There's Kill Team.
It's really funny. Yeah, there's a certain amount of customer exhaustion I think that comes out of that, and so I think they're trying to divide up their releases probably between lines and trying to compartmentalize their customers a little bit because it's very hard. I mean, when I was a kid, you could be a Games Workshop hobbyist and keep up and play all the games because when something new came out, the release schedule tended to focus on it for 6 or 8 weeks at least, or a month or 2. whenever. You had Necromunda releases all the way through Christmas, and you could just play that one game for a while and enjoy it. And now it's like 2 weeks later, a whole other game system's coming, and it's hard to, you have to catch your breath. It's hard to do that. I'm excited about, I've actually been playing the Batman miniature game quite a bit recently, the second edition of that. It's been a bit of a struggle because I have a lot of miniatures from the first edition, but they have what's called a legacy format where a lot of stuff is no longer compatible. Well, it's compatible, but it's not, it's not official anymore. So you have that, like, if you do what I do, you play against a lot of strangers and a lot of my friends too, but a lot of people will come and play me that we haven't played before. I have to kind of, I guess, adhere to an expectation of playing with what's current, so that if you're playing people you don't know, that you have that same baseline understanding of how the game works and what you're playing with. And so I've had to like update basically everything. Most of my Batman still work, but you have to have a lot of like just regular Joe police officer to make that game work. So it's been fun though, because I'm painting some new stuff. I'm pretty excited about the bat boxes they're doing, because it seems like as a business they've kind of wrapped their heads around the understanding of we can't, I think, sustainably keep selling everyone 20-pound blisters forever. Even though this product is quite expensive and we have to pay for licenses, these bat boxes tend to be playable right out of the box. And I think especially for them as a business, that's something that retailers can understand is, if you just buy this, if you just sell this one thing, it's like your faction boxes. If you just buy this one thing, you can play and enjoy the game. And that's been really good for them. And then what else have I been playing recently? I've been playing Song of Ice and Fire. Really enjoy. And it's funny because there's the complete opposite, a company that started a product line off knowing that was important. I painted up my Night's Watch starter set over the October. It was October. I'm playing a bunch of games with that. And then Owen's been painting the Free Folk, so we've been reenacting Battle of the Wall quite a bit. And that's actually something else I'm taking to Adepticon, is some Song of Ice and Fire stuff to play.
So I meant to play actually. I meant to play a lot of things. I just recently went to Element Games, the Top Table Legacy Weekender, which was a non-competitive weekend of reserved space gaming at Element. We took the entire hall. And it was ticket only, and lots of events, lots of different systems, lots of demos. There was some scenery building going on there, some painting demonstrations, a lot of different stuff. And of course, I ended up, I played some board games that I brought along, but I ended up demoing my game and not being able to play anything else, unfortunately. But Song of Ice and Fire was on my list of the things that I'm, kicking myself. I didn't get to try out.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I'll be doing that this weekend a little bit at Adepticon.
The nice thing is that it is a game that compartmentalizes well. If you only have that Song of Ice and Fire starter set, you can play the game pretty much forever. Those are nice army lists, and they've done a good job too of digitizing their war game. So there's an app called War Council, and it has all the stats for all the miniatures, all of the rules of the game. There's an embedded PDF rulebook and stuff as well. So if you want to have like a one-stop digital shop and you just have the models, you can play it right off your phone. Because it was funny, I was thinking about those as I was packing up to get ready to go to Adepticon. I was looking at what cards I need to take, and I was like, I don't need cards. I have my phone. I can literally play this game on my phone. And the same thing for Infinity. I was packing up my Varun army for Infinity to go play this weekend, and I realized I didn't have to take anything else. I just needed counters and some dice.
No, that's very nice.
It's a popular. It's funny how it's a great leveler too, because it removes a barrier for a lot of people to purchase games if they can look at it and kind of examine it first. I do feel that it detracts a little bit. I love books. I love collecting books. I love the feel of books. I have moved 1,300 pounds of gaming rule books between several companies or countries several times now, and I'm still loath to give them up as much as I have way too many rule books. And I do worry a little bit that that's something that this new marketing thing of giving away the rules for free and selling the miniatures. I think that's fine, but it does kind of threaten the future of the gaming rulebook as a physical commodity, as a thing that people care about. So
the one nice thing about a lot of the hard books I know that do that is that they have like all the fluff stories are first come out in the hardcover books. or there's special rules that you can only get in the hardcover books. So there's an incentive to kind of get the special book.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a balance.
So
I think the balance of that is important. Is giving away the core elements is, I think, fine.
Yeah, getting people into the game, and then
and then there needs to be an incentive to get the actual physical rule books. They stay relevant, I think, because some companies have gone away from it completely. I think Privateer Press stopped making rule books.
Yeah,
just period.
Oh, really?
they just stop. They just get away from free now. Or cards. They don't package cards in their products anymore. So you actually have to buy or print off their website. So you're either paying to print them off the website, or you're paying for the War Room app.
Yeah, for that app.
I see.
Play.
Yeah.
But you couldn't pick up and play the game out of the box anymore, which I think is that is a bit worrisome, I think, because if you, let's say it's
hard to expand the market that
way. But
if
you're a retailer, if I'm I don't know, if I'm old Edwin, the shop owner, and I have model trains in my store, I don't really understand how these newfangled miniature war games work. But I buy a product for my consumer that says, "Oh, they told me that everything you need to play is in this box," but then they come back and they go, "Well, there wasn't cards. I don't know what to do." You know, there's a certain element of like, you need to be careful with that. We do live in a digital age, but at the same time, the further you push that,
right,
there's an on the street implication, I guess, to that happening. I guess when you change.
Well, I guess my perspective is that the digital side of things should be a player aid, really. And the way that I look at the free rules model is that typically most people I've seen playing Drowned Earth, they buy the rule book. They don't buy it to begin with. I sell a lot of rule books where people just buy a rule book and send it out, and it's obviously that they've already bought the models, they've tried the game out, they like it, and they end up buying the rule book because everybody likes, shiny things. And for me, it's a great pleasure because I'm super proud of the rule book. I did all the graphic design and the layout myself, and taught myself how to do it while I was doing it. And so any mistakes in it are completely my fault. I've got nobody else to blame. But I always want the physical thing because I like the idea of being able to look things up on my phone or on my app, but I really want the tactile feeling of flicking through a rule book to look up a rule instead of sort of swiping a screen.
I'll tell you, it is way easier when you are filming to have a physical rule book in front of you than it is to try.
Yeah, I'm sure, because we've all got that sort of instinctive muscle memory where you just cut to the section of the rule book where it's somewhere around there, and you have a flick around. And in mine, there's a reason why I made the each chapter surround a different color. It's because then I actually think of them as the purple chapter and the orange chapter and the gray chapter, and
just you taught yourself all this as you're going along. I had to go to school for years to learn about things like color separation and divisive learning and stuff like that. Oh my god,
it's amazing what you can learn from YouTube tutorials.
That's true, and trial and error.
Yeah.
And the scary thing, which is putting things in front of people and having them use them.
Yeah, and making it user friendly is, and I mean, I think a difficult thing about rule books, which is pertinent to all kinds of games, but miniatures games especially, is that balance of you have to make a choice. Is this a rules reference for people who know how to play, or is this a teaching aid to teach people who don't yet know how to play? Right. And it's very hard to do both of those things at the same time, which is why I think Fantasy Flight nowadays, that you buy one of those games and there's two pamphlets. There's the learn to play and the rules reference, and it makes a lot of sense.
It's really funny. There's been two rule books recently that have kind of thrown that into a kind of stark relief for me. And the where it first kind of came to light, and it's funny because it was in the miniature wargaming industry, it was actually in Dungeons and Dragons, was the 5th edition player's handbook. It was the first player's handbook that was actually written in the order that you do things.
Yeah.
And that was,
nice.
That was actually something that I decided to do when I wrote Last Days. And I'd noticed that Joe had done when he wrote Frostgrave was you if you take the miniature wargaming experience as a physical number of acts that you do, if you just lay a rule book out in that order, it actually makes it way easier to learn how to play a game. So if the first thing you do when you start playing a game is collect some miniatures, then the first thing you should do in a rulebook is talk about collecting miniatures to get ready to play the game.
Yeah.
And then how do you assign them? How do you pick which ones to play with? How do you equip them? So that was how the game, the rulebook was organized. It's become kind of almost a touchstone, I think, in Osprey games. Is when you write a rulebook, start from the very first thing that people are going to be doing. And I'm actually writing another rulebook right now. I got a deadline actually in 5 days.
Oh, great!
I'm finishing the editing of the rulebook right now, and that's actually the other thing I've been playing a bunch with Owen right now. So we've been playtesting some of my new game. But having it in that order where you start with the first thing you do, which is collect the things you need to play, and then organize them in such a way that you're ready to play, and then you literally go putting the table together to play, setting the miniatures down on the table to play, and then having the actual bulk of the rules is when they start actually moving around and doing stuff, and everything else can come after that. But people absorb by doing. So if you write a rule in the order in which things will be actually taking place each time people play, they tend to absorb it all better. And even if it's the stuff that is the preparatory stuff, so I honestly, I firmly believe that in all hobbyists there is this big colored pie chart of likes and dislikes, or I shouldn't say likes and dislikes, preferences usually, and some slices are being the other. And there are people who spend most of their miniature wargaming hobby just obsessing over getting ready to play a game. Collecting the miniatures and painting them and getting just the right collection of terrain and having the right colors in the right places and having special objectives for every scenario and all that stuff. If you give them their very own section that they can obsess over, you're creating I think a bigger menu of options.
I certainly in my childhood I loved all those, how to get, I mean, all Games Workshop games, how to collect and paint your models, what a collection is and all that sort of thing. And it's an interesting thing that nowadays, the most miniature war games, certainly mine is guilty of this. You write from the perspective that somebody already knows what a miniature war game is. And that idea of it being accessible in any way is it just isn't the intuitive way that you'd approach it. But I definitely what you were saying resonates a lot about doing things ordering your book in the order that you actually perform the tasks in order to learn the game, because I have slowly been writing a quick start version of the Drowned Earth rules, because I'm pretty sure I can teach it in 20 pages instead of the 80 odd that it takes at the moment, because most of that 80 pages is they're sort of rules lawyer proof clauses.
It's actually it's the underwriting of the main rules, right? So I've been there. I'm actually, I would call that the net effect of playtesting, is when you start adding clauses. And what I typically find is if I have to add too many clauses to something, I can usually write a better initial sentence.
To make it clear.
I'm very lucky in that I have my own personal pet sociopath Owen to playtest my games, who will immediately show me where I need to put better language or improve my language. I shouldn't say sociopath. He's more of a Gordon Gekko. I guess Gordon. but
like everybody needs somebody with that mindset of trying to break your game. Like where are the loopholes?
Well, because the problem is that when you write something, your intent is always clear in your mind, and it colors when you read something.
Yeah,
and you need that outside lens to be able to take a look at it and say, "Oh, but you haven't prevented me from doing X, which will gain me Y." So you need to either improve how this is worded or inject a clause. And you're definitely right. I almost look at any rulebook I've written, and I was lucky because when I wrote Last Days, I wrote it in 2009, but it didn't get published until 2018. Yeah, so I wrote it for my friends and I in 2009, and we played it for like 8 years. And then my relationship with Osprey picked up after Frostgrave, and they offered to publish it. And so that was a game that got played for 8 years previous to publication, whereas for this time around, it's going from 0 to publication without 8 years of previously being played. So that having that get boiled out fast, I think, is super important. And I would almost guarantee almost anything you write if you come back to it after, because Drowned Earth's been out since what's been almost 2 years now. Two?
Well,
a year retail and 2
it's been
years
1
working
year
on
since the Kickstarter delivery.
Right. Okay. So in that time, how many iterations has the game been played through now, so that people can spot things and see things?
Well, so interesting. I'm kind of proud of myself actually on this level that the 99.9% of the rules questions I've asked are things which are in the rule book but people just haven't found. And I've got an errata list, but there isn't a lot actually. That's sort of, I mean, I turned into my own personal psychopath on the just like getting really obsessed with it and riding all my friends and everyone who was playtesting to really, read the hell out of it and try and make sure that there weren't any ambiguities and that everything was clear and that there weren't all of those kind of weird rules interactions. And there aren't too many. I mean, there are a few things where I think I could change the wording and make it clearer or better.
I think the most clever thing you did was the movement system, because the movement system, it basically gives you 3 stages. And so if you look at your train collection, doesn't matter what your train collection is, if there's 3 things in that train collection that are in your way up to your maximum movement, then how well you succeed just dictates how many of those 3 things you can overcome. And so it doesn't, it's ambiguous enough that it can handle real life situations, which is really nice. And I think that's really clever. It's one of my favorite things about the Drowned Earth is that it has a simple cleverness that's very hard to game, because it's typically, to game something, it has to be really crunchy. In this instance, it's vague enough that whatever scenario you're in, it can encompass. You know what I mean? So as opposed to trying to give the solution to every equation, it just says you and your opponent identify how many things are in your way, how many obstacles you have to excel to overcome, basically. And then whichever ones you hit. So it puts I guess it's a very tricky thing to do in rules writing, where you take the responsibility away from yourself and you actually project it onto the player. And say you and your opponent figure out how many of these things there are when you do this, and then just roll and see what he sees, because then they can't take the responsibility of having the answer from you, the designer. You've pushed into them, so that they have to actually come up with it for themselves. And that's I think that is in 9 times out of 10 in rules writing, if you find yourself making a clause or something, you have to arbitrate a dispute that hasn't happened yet. So you're adding a rule, you're injecting something in your rules to try and prevent an argument. If you just put the responsibility on the players, you don't have to do any more writing.
And
you just say from the get-go, the most important part of this rule is you have really good communication with your opponent.
Figure it out.
And I think that's really important, and I really like that, and I really like rules that encourage player interaction.
It's funny. Infinity is the game. I'm sure at least one of you has heard the saying. What is it? Football is a gentleman's game played by hooligans, and rugby is a hooligan's game played by gentlemen.
Yeah, it's a Winston Churchill quote, I think.
Is it Churchill? I didn't actually know who to attribute that to. But I would say that in this case, 40K is to football at what Infinity is to rugby in this case.
Right. Yeah.
Infinity has so many hooliganous possibilities, because so much of it's relying upon good communication upon the players.
Much shenanigans. Yeah.
Well, but because the game forces you to communicate well, you have an instant so the primary rule that everyone misses in Infinity is, before anyone does anything, you can point to any spot on the table and ask what can see it. What do I know that's on the table that can see this point on the table? So there's no such thing as a gotcha moment in that game unless you're not playing it correctly.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a game that is designed around gotcha moments and around surprise interactions, but that arms you with the tools to communicate with your opponent, to have all the information
so that they don't give you that negative play experience. Yeah,
that's right. You don't have a bad play experience. And I think that's the same thing in the Drowned Earth that I really like, is because you're equipped with tools to answer all those questions before you commit to them. It just comes out of the dice, and you can't control the dice.
And I think that's so. Teaching the game, one thing that people and generally when I demo the game, I don't explain it in the declare, roll and then resolve way, because I think it's it's a little it works very well once somebody knows how to play the game, that you say, okay, this is where I'm moving, is that okay? Right, now I'm going to roll to see whether I get there. Yep, okay, and now I'm going to move the thing. But in a demo, it's not so fluid, and so we kind of fudge that a little bit. But that, I think, is a really important part of it, which I think also they do in Infinity, where you just make your intention very, very clear before you roll the dice and before you touch a model.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually always encouraged, because I've TO'd a lot of Infinity events as a work early on. I actually would always front load stuff like that at the beginning of an event and say, 9 times out of 10, any dispute you have that needs me to come over, you guys can head off by having excellent communication before you even start doing what you're doing. Yeah. So never forget, and I'll explain 2 or 3 rules, such as, remember, declare your first skill, wait for your opponent, put your finger anywhere on the table and ask what can see it that you know is on the table right now.
Yeah,
all of these things, because you're going to get upset by the game. Will upset you when something happens that you weren't prepared for. You have all the tools to prepare yourself. I actually really encourage people to play games of Infinity, and I would actually say even the Drowned Earth, using a silhouette marker, like your little you have a silhouette marker actually, Earth as well. Yeah. And when you're declaring your intent, actually place it in the intended position. Yeah, like measure to the intended position.
That's exactly the point of those silhouette markers. You state your intent, you roll the dice, and if you need to move 4 instead of 6, you just backtrack along your movement path, and it's that simple.
And you're better. You're just giving, again, it's you talk about player aids and how they should convenience the players. Anything that helps to clarify that communication, like a token or something like that, and just adds the play experience. You're being very thorough in how you're describing what people are doing and how, and it means that both people are very satisfied with the outcome, because everything was agreed upon before the dice were even rolled. And then that's the dice roll is just you and your opponent watching the movie happen. Yeah. Right. The part that's outside your control taking place, and you get to enjoy the result together if it's done right.
Yeah. And I think there's the other, I would say it takes a little bit of time for people to get their head around the timing concept, where the order of the timing in the rule book is simply the order of resolution, so that you make sure you never have to take off tokens that don't exist and things like that. But actually, thematically, at least, these things are not happening in sequence. So people do sometimes ask, hang on a minute, but he hit and then he charged in and then he does this other thing, but because he was already killed at that stage. And I'm like, well, no, rewind. He's not already killed at that stage. You've already determined that he'll be dead by the end. But that's it,
Time is a flat circle. All these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it works really well. And I think it's essential for a game with a reaction mechanic that it operates like that. And it also prevents an awful lot of like weird situations and rules interactions and confusion. So it's all super clear, but I think it's a little bit difficult to get your head around to begin with, and that's why probably the rules question I answer the most. The rules answer that I give the most is look at the black page, because the black page is the one with all of the timing, the order of absolutely everything that you would ever resolve during an action.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've gone on a huge tangent. So, but on the subject of what are we playing?
So what games are you playing, Shawn?
Well, it was a good conversation. So it's funny because it was actually a very neat segue a while ago. You mentioned Adeptus Titanicus. I managed to break out with a friend of mine, BattleTech. Speaking of 1980s games with big giant stompy robots.
Crunchy games.
Yeah, very. And we had a lot of fun. And I said at the end of it, I've really enjoyed this. I'm glad miniatures games aren't like this anymore. But it was there's something really joyful about your sort of mech sheets and checking off the little armor locations and rolling on tables to see whether the arm explodes and flies off in a random direction.
It's funny. I get asked a lot when I'll do BattleTech on GMG, and it's funny because I was exposed to BattleTech in the 80s at the same time as I was exposed to Titanicus, and I tried both, and I picked Titanicus because I suppose as a miniature warrior, the best word I can use to describe myself is I'm a romantic. I can hear the horns and see the action happening, and everything that removes me from that while that interaction with me and my opponent's taking place, it draws me further and further out from that action. And I love the idea of BattleTech, but it's about one step over the line for Crunchy for me.
Yeah.
And I've heard actually that the new one, the newest edition by Catalyst, actually I should try because it's a bit back from that too.
Well,
actually,
that's the one we played. He bought the boxed set, and he said, you know, there's a kind of arcane joy in trying to in battling how difficult the company has made it to buy anything or understand anything, or you know, I'm not sure I
feel like you've overcome the odds just getting on the table and playing.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember as a kid, that was, you know, before there was an internet. I used to sit in my lunch hour poring over RPG rule books and that kind, and working them out, and there was a pleasure to that. And now I'm just completely lazy.
Well, I think what's funny is, again, we're talking about generations, right? Is a lot of game design, I think it follows a curve generationally, where the things you're exposed to as your hobbies when you're younger tend to populate and color what you create later on in life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our early games are populated by the arcane insanity that is a lot of early RPGs. Like first edition D&D was a very crunchy game.
Yeah.
Calculating weights and how much you're carrying and stuff like that. And if you look over time, just the parabola that it's taken in design concept, you now have in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons a 1 dice resolution system for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And at most 2, because you have advantage or disadvantage, and you're rolling high, rolling low, and discarding.
It's actually a point I made about BattleTech, where you know, we were talking about it afterwards, and I said, you know, it's easy to forget, but this was designed at a time where the barrier or the distinction between miniatures games and RPG games was much less distinct than it is now.
Well, it used to be a sticker on the game, 3D role play. Yeah, that was the old slogan actually of all of the original GW games. It was a 3D role play game. It was
sometimes it feels like the skirmish games that are going out now are almost the battles of an RPG, or the battles.
I mean, that's beauty almost is a miniature game. It recommends even that you use miniatures for almost everything, and it's so someone described the 5th edition of D&D as the best miniature skirmish game I'll ever play. I said, well. But what's funny is I think now what you see hobbies that people have as they're younger. I'm not saying everyone's just a generalization, but hobbies have been streamlined, right? A video game asks so much less of you to enjoy it. So if you were to sit down and play League of Legends, the time between you starting the program and playing a game is just 2 or 3 clicks. You know what I mean? The preparation of the blood cost of miniature war games is infinitely higher in hours and you know, you're
that's true,
than a video game. And so that's where I think you're seeing the success of these new miniature war games with, you know, push fit pieces, and like X-Wing I think is the best example of the lightning in a bottle in that for this industry.
And I mean that's actually
all you had to do, and you're ready to play. Like that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the reasons I described it at the time as being a game devoid of hobby guilt, and that's why I bought into X-Wing.
There's a great comic book. It's like, it's great, everything you need to play in one box, and then the next panel over, it's like the guy's wife walked through the thing, and they're like dressed in like flight suits, and the whole room is just full of like spaceships, and the guy just looks at his wife and goes, "Mistakes were made." In a nutshell to me. I only played it once or twice. I never owned anything for X-Wing. I owned some Armada, and we played some Armada, but I didn't own any X-Wing because for me, it removed so much of my personal experience in hobbying. Right?
Yeah.
It was fun. It was fun to play, but I wasn't engaged with it. I didn't feel any attachment to it because it wasn't mine.
Yeah,
this wasn't my.
Yeah, you can do a augment to the ship, but
I could have. I'm sure if I was a bigger Star Wars fan, which I'm just not a big Star Wars fan, I could have gotten to that place with that game, but it didn't initially grab me, and so I wasn't.
I definitely did a bunch of X-Wing repaints. I sort of went in fairly deep, but my favorite way to play actually all of those Fantasy Flight games is just take the first 2 waves, throw away all like upgrade cards and what have you, and just play the core mechanics, because I think they design great core mechanics that are then massively confused by this desire to keep the meta moving forward and keep people interested.
That's not good meta. That's sales.
Absolutely, and I completely understand, and I think a lot of people thrive on that. A lot of people love it, but personally, I don't like the stress of having to keep up.
That's becoming less and less, I think, desirable actually in this market. I think you're seeing games like Malifaux and War Machine struggle under the weight of their inability to discard what they've created.
So I have a question for you actually, because this is something, you know, that I've been thinking about a lot. In a game like Magic the Gathering, they have a rotation where old profiles, old cards get shuffled out of active play and are only available in like a legacy format. You know, so there's a limitation. So a game like Infinity, for example, which has a vast amount of profiles, probably I would say has a problem in attracting new players just because the learning curve is so steep.
So what's funny is, use that as an example, but they've actually discarded 4 factions now.
Oh, really? Interesting.
They've put out of production all the miniatures. Yeah. So the first one they did it to was I think the first one was Akon. It might have been one of the Yuching factions. JSA became an N2A faction, and then they got it was the French, actually. It was the Merovingians. Right. So they discontinued production of all the miniatures, but what they've done is they've sequestered the list, and it will remain unchanged. So if you have miniatures you want to play with, you can continue playing with them. Yeah, but they've completely discontinued the model line to try and streamline their model. And there's a whole bunch of great reasons for doing it. Mostly with the fact that if you have SKUs that are just dead and not selling, you want to create new SKUs to send to distributors, you need to kill some SKUs. It just has to happen. Yeah. And what's great about Infinity as a company is they have all the metadata to prove that no one's buying them, because every time you play a tournament, you log what miniatures you used. So they are so good. So yeah, because you upload the army list in Infinity Army. So they literally have real-time data year on year on how often miniatures are being used. They can compare to their sales data and say, oh yeah, we can just kill this. No one's even going to care. Yeah, and they do. And there'll always be a vocal minority be like, oh, you killed my baby, you threw it out with the bathwater, blah blah. But it doesn't matter. It's not affecting your sales. They weren't buying anything anyway. Yeah.
And they've got the baby already.
Well, they've now just killed Toha, I think.
Right.
Yeah, a bunch of them, because I was going to get into Spiral Core myself.
They killed all the SKUs. Like 90% of the SKUs are gone. Yeah. Including like the main line trooper SKU. And then they've killed a couple other armies as well. And I shouldn't say killed, because they're still playable factions, but the stuff is no longer in production, which means for them as a business, they can just stop worrying about it. It can just be there on the side. They can stop worrying about it. And if they're not making anything new for it, they have to balance it against anything else. Players are accepted to play with that as to play with something that's now locked in time. I think that Malifaux and Privateer Press are different because they never remove anything from the game. Yeah. Ever. Yeah. The miniatures that you bought in Mark 1 for Privateer Press are still in existence. And Malifaux is actually starting to move towards that. They're now finally in their 3rd edition starting to remove things from the game. And I think that is a lesson everyone could learn from Magic the Gathering. But I think that as an industry, our companies are nervous about that because they assume their customers have an innate attachment to what they've built and painted. Games Workshop still labors under the curse of having killed a fantasy dwarf biker sci-fi army 20 years ago. Yeah, no one was buying.
yeah, but now everybody acts like it's the Holy Grail, and it just got thrown away.
But it's so funny that that stigma exists, whereas in Magic the Gathering there isn't that stigma because people don't feel the attachment towards cardboard; they feel towards something they built and painted. Yeah, but for the health, like you're saying, for the health of something, I think that there's lots of ways of handling that will make the consumer still feel okay about their investment and then excited about what's new and coming out. I just don't think it's something that this industry is considered as much as it should, because it helps you create new products when you can compartmentalize things and not have to have an ever expanding list of unintended consequences. That's what broke second edition Alpha.
Well, and also, I mean, it's not necessarily
like organized play cycle.
True to a degree with Magic the Gathering because they reprint. certain cards. But I think the idea of a rotation is that you're not just retiring stuff forever, but it'll come back at some stage. And the reason why it appeals to me, I mean, I'm obviously not going to be in a position where I need to worry about it for years, but where you've just got this enormous range bloat where people find it overwhelming, you can just limit the amount of profiles that people need to learn by heart in order to play the game competitively. And you don't kill them permanently, you bring them back at some stage, you know, perhaps in a slightly new or different form. But,
I have no doubt Infinity will do that. That's they're funny because the other thing they do really well, and this I've said this before, but this is my biggest compliment to them as game designers, is they never reduce the capability of something, they only add.
Yeah,
and that's a really interesting, I think, way of approaching game design. Is if you look at miniatures that people say, well, that thing's way overpowered. Well, it's doing the thing we wanted it to do. How do we make it so the other options in the same category are also attractive? And so what they tend to do is, instead of making things worse ever, they will instead go and improve the quality around it, so they're on a level playing field.
Yeah.
And I think that's an incredibly valuable design lesson for almost any company, because when someone pays dollars for a toy soldier to do something on the table, you never want to spoil that investment, right? If I paid real life dollars for something and I wanted to do the thing that I wanted, it should do that thing forever, and I think that's fine. Games Workshop actually is guilty of this right now. I think chasing the wants of their tournament players, and they've vastly changed their Warhammer 40,000 game system in 2 years since it was released, to being not really recognizable anymore. They took a game. They said, play with whatever you want. Here's this great keyword matching system. Here's a bunch. They basically tricked people into playing Unbound. When the game came out, there was this concept of just take whatever you want and play with it, and everyone was like, "Bah, breaks the game. We can't play Unbound." So then in 8th edition, they just fooled everybody into playing Unbound by saying, "Here's an attachment type for every type of model in the game." So if you want to play with all those types of models, you just can't. So the game is Unbound, but we've tricked you into not thinking it is by giving this false parameter you can all just conform to. And it's really interesting because you've gotten to this place now where they've patched the game away from that. They've changed. The one that drives me crazy is this rule of 3. So I think it was Adepticon or the LVO or something last year, where this Flying Hive Tyrant army list just destroyed everything that it touched, just broke the game. And people were up in arms about it. And so they patched the game by saying you can never have more than 3 of any one type of data sheet in your army, period, across the game. And when you're playing match play. And the problem is that the people playing in their basements, gaming clubs, even if they're never going to play in a tournament, everybody, because they play strangers, follows that. They follow that. Well, there's a standard way of playing the game. I'll build my army to that point value, and I'll obey all these restrictions. And so what they've effectively done is said, never buy more than 3 of anything we make. I'm like, what? this is literally the business. What? And I understand chasing tournament play and chasing that competitive edge, but you have these unintended consequences when you make decisions like that. And yes, there's an unlimited number of permutations in 40K by playing it Unbound, which they've decided they want people to do. But then to clamp back the other way, you're constantly having to solve more and more knock-on problems forever, as opposed to just limiting what's played in tournament play. If they just took control at themselves, as opposed to having the fans do it, and said, well, here's the tournament pack for every year. Here's what you can and can't do in a tournament. If they just solve their own problem, then nobody would have to follow the whole rest of the hobby that they have. Wouldn't have to follow these rules, right? They would just create a format to play tournaments in instead. And they can do what you said, compartmentalize it, not have everything be available in tournaments, and people will just be okay with it.
But I feel like that's probably a design focus towards tournament play that Games Workshop kind of eschews and avoids where possible. I sort of feel like there's always from their design team, there's always this attitude of well, you could do that, but don't be a dick, sort of thing.
But the problem is that they're not patching the main game to offset that could happen in tournaments. Right? So it's one or the other.
For me, it's just lazy.
Don't stay involved. Either leave the game alone and don't get involved in tournaments, or stop patching the game based on what's happening in tournaments.
It's got
to be one or the other. doesn't make any sense. So yeah, so I don't know. I think we're in a funny spot where there's lots of ways of handling your model line when it gets really big. For you, that'll be a good problem to have. When you hit that point,
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
I'll be like, I made it. I'm at a level now where I've miniatures. We produce too much stuff, but for some of these companies, I honestly think it chased away customers. I think that in War Machine in particular, and Elephant is chasing customers away towards the end of their editions because you can't. It just becomes too much. You can't.
Yeah, it's another barrier to entry, isn't it? You realize that if the cognitive load of being competitive at your game is so high, you're not the you're not the only show in town. There's lots of other things that people can go and do instead.
Well, and I think as their market gets older too, because their core market probably is still between 25 and 50, but that's an age range where your money to free time ratio begins to
change a lot. Yeah,
get a little bit uneven. I still have the same amount of money to spend, but I can't spend a whole weekend playing games anymore because my children will freeze stuff in the dark and starve in a corner.
Yeah.
And so it becomes, I need more. I want to be able to condense that experience down, and even just the getting ready to play experience needs to be condensed down into a more manageable amount of time. I think that's where a lot of these table games are market.
Yeah.
That's dominated by big company level games, because it's like going to the restaurant and just ordering appetizers. I can try a little bit of everything. I want to eat this joint.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill myself in 2 hours. I'm just going to have a bunch of appetizers and try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, well, I describe myself as a hobby butterfly, and one of the reasons why a lot of the design choices that I made for the Drowned Earth were trying to facilitate people not playing the game for 2-3 months, picking it up and finding it easy to pick up, and finding the a lot of things like the dice mechanic works more or less the same regardless of whether you're shooting or climbing or leaping or swimming or doing whatever you're doing. Just trying to apply some basic principles that work and apply them over and over again, and the same with skills. I think Blood Bowl is a very good example of that, actually, as a game where there are quite a number of special skills, but many of them are variations on themes, and so it's quite easy to remember them because you're like, oh, well, that's like that, but agility instead of strength.
Right. I've never seen climbing. Ability to kind of manage in a one dice resolution system. You can manage just applying it to different stats and different situations and stuff. I really like the way that range is actually handled through varying degrees of success. It's easy to hit something up close, you need a single success, but once you get outside, you need to get at least 2 stages of success to try and hit something. Because I think it beautifully balances against the resolution system of dodging, right? Where you only need to succeed a little in dodging to avoid a lot of shot at range.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's something that you see a lot with new players. They don't dodge enough. They always want to shoot back. And
no one wins. Unless it's like me. I got aggressively feeded into the ground when I played Jason. He feeded like 10 out of like 12 rolls. And it wasn't even feeding on rolling one on the feet die. It was getting doubles. Just I don't know what the percentage of possibility was, but it was unbelievably low.
Yeah.
He could feed by rolling. He just aggressively feed me. It was like every time I stuck my head into anything, I just died.
Yeah. It's in fact also a little bit like Blood Bowl. I feel like Drowned Earth is one of those games where if you get really annoyed when your opponent's dice are great or yours are terrible, don't play this game. It's not for you.
Move your turn counter and never go for it at the
goal line. Okay, so I think we're almost at the time where we need to wind up. Now, I'm slightly concerned. Not only can I not hear Shawn, but when Shawn talks, normally the way this works is that whoever talks takes over the screen automatically. So I have a feeling we might have to go in and put some subtitles in. And when I say we, I'm using the royal way. I mean Shawn is. But we're going to do a quick fire question round where I'm just going to ask a question, and I'll say Ash, and then I'll say Shawn, and then I'll ask the next question. There's one where I'm going to have to make a qualification, but if I'm not reacting much to Shawn's answers, it's because I can't hear them. Okay, so ready? Okay, so quick fire round. Question 1. Ash, favorite color to paint on a miniature?
Red.
Shawn?
I keep doing purple and orange.
Okay, 2. Least favorite color to paint?
Yellow.
I knew you'd say that. Shawn?
Neon colors, really bright.
I thought I was better at lip reading than I really am. Okay, so okay, this is a good one actually. Ash, top YouTube channel recommendation.
I don't really watch YouTube.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The only one. So there's one YouTube channel I subscribed to recently, and it's Z Bradshaw's what is it? Animated spellbook for 5th edition D&D. The guy's hilarious. He does these like little animations of spells and stuff. It's great.
Yep. Shawn?
Ashes. And
okay, so I'm going to go. I mean, obviously, Ash's channel is the number one answer, but I'm going to go for Luke Towan. He's a model railway guy, but amazing quality stuff, really fantastic. His name's Luke Towan. If you Google it, you'll find it. I can't remember the name of the channel, unfortunately. Okay, so well, this is the one where I'm going to have to qualify this slightly. Ash, what is the best thing about being Canadian?
Oh, the best thing about being Canadian, clean drinking water.
Shawn, you're not Canadian. What's the best thing about being American?
Clean drink. All you can want. Don't say drinking water. Flint, Michigan's a place.
Okay, worst thing about being Canadian.
Oh, all the speech impediment jokes. We just don't talk the way people think we talk.
Yeah, the South Park thing. I feel like we get the same as a kindred spirit in kindred spirit in the British sense. We both, as nations, we both get accused of saying sorry a lot. And I think in the British case, it's actually quite true. Shawn, worst thing about being an American?
All the Americans, and that we don't get along.
Okay, and okay, right. Super quick. Just first thing that comes into your mind: are you a painter or a gamer?
Oh. Both. I'm more of a painter than a gamer.
Shawn?
I'll say I'm more of a painter than a gamer.
Painter because of time, gamer by choice.
Okay, right. This is a nice one. Name a film that has not yet been turned into a miniatures game, but really deserves to be.
Oh. Robot Shots.
Shawn?
Equilibrium and Highlander.
And what have we got? What's your current favorite game that isn't Drowned Earth? Because let's not embarrass you by making you say that.
My current favorite game that isn't Drowned Earth, Gaslands.
Okay, Shawn?
Wild West Exodus.
I'm going to go for this tiny little thing, Deep Sea Adventure. If you haven't played it, it's by Oink Games. It's a brilliant push your luck game where you just roll 2 dice and you're diving to get treasure, but you're in an old-time submarine where you're all sharing the same oxygen and you just end up being greedy and drowning all your friends. It's hilarious. Okay, favorite Drowned Earth sculpt?
Probably. Oh, that's hard. Probably either Aeronax or what's the bondsman monkey called? Not Hosk, the other one.
Fankanya.
Fang.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna get that right.
It's named after a French guy.
Okay. Fair enough.
Shawn. Okay, and finally, if your style of wargaming was a food, what food would you be?
Tapas.
It's a good answer. I had dim sum, which is more or less tapas, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. One of the advantages of being so close to Salute is that we got to do this pre-recorded session, which means we can have you two guys on in a different time zone. It's been an awful lot of fun. I hope you've also enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely. If you are going to Salute this year too, you should check out my buddy Chris Kohler. He's coming over from California with his little indie skirmish game called Wild in the Streets. Wild in the Streets. Okay. So if you like, yeah, you should check out his game. He'll have a booth there. I can't remember who he's hanging with, so he'll be mad at me later. But I'm going to see him this weekend anyway, so you can chat to me then. Well, if you if you want to have street fights between. If you let me know what stand number he'll be in, I'll put it in the description. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out and send it to you. But yeah, it's a game of like the goth kids fighting the straight edge kids, fighting the punk kids, fighting whoever, the roller girls. It's a lot of fun. Awesome. Wild in the Streets. It was a film, wasn't it? Yes, it was a film, but his is very much punk rock. Right. It's good. Cool, gents. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on. Bye, guys. Okay. Bye.